drift away.
You see, this is one of the massive protests against a nationwide crackdown on undocumented immigrants. These protesters angry, denouncing the sudden arrests in a rally. This one is outside the White House.
Take a look at the protests in Austin overnight. Demonstrators held signs blasting President Trump's plan for a border wall, waving the Mexican flag in the air. The protests spilled onto the roadways, tying up traffic in the Austin area for hours. Now, authorities have arrested undocumented immigrants in 12 states from coast to coast, the latest being more than 200 arrests in the Midwest, and 37 immigrants detained in California have been deported to Mexico now.
Officials say most of the people they locked up had already been convicted of felonies, including violent charges like child sex crimes, weapons, or assault charges. Now, this is the first large-scale enforcement of this action during the president's term. Joining me now to discuss what this all means, Tom LoBianco, CNN politics reporter, Errol Lewis, CNN political commentator and political anchor for Spectrum News, and Joey Jackson, CNN legal analyst and criminal defense attorney. Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
Good morning.
So, Errol, let me start with you. And I first want to play the president in that now well-known speech from Phoenix, where he talked about immigration. Actually, you know what? Let's go to the Anderson Cooper interview where he talks about it first.
My first day in office, I am going to notify law enforcement authorities that all of the bad dudes, and we have a lot of them, that are here illegally, that are the heads of gangs and drug cartels and all sorts of people, and there are probably millions of them, but certainly hundreds of thousands, big numbers. They're out.
So, Errol, the question is what we're seeing the president just keeping a campaign promise?
Well, not only that, I mean, really, Victor, in just 3 weeks, they did not organize all of these raids. This was pursuant to existing policy. Under the Obama administration, the so-called bad dudes were at the top of the list for deportation. So they went ahead and moved forward with the kinds of people who were always deportable, for whom deportation orders had already been issued, or people who had been convicted of violent felonies, drug selling, and so forth. There was a sort of a slight change in implementation that probably rounded up percentage-wise less than 10% more than who would have already been subject to arrest and deportation. So to a certain extent, I think the administration is kind of getting a bad rap. It's not as if they invented this idea. Let's remember back in 2012, the Obama administration deported over 400,000 people in a single year.
Yeah, Joey, let me come to you because this is what we heard from David Marin with the Los Angeles office of ICE. He said that this operation was in the planning stages before the current administration issued its executive order. We do these operations 2 or 3 times a year. This is on par with past operations. But I understand from our conversation about this earlier that you believe this is very different.
Well, I do. And just to be clear and to be fair, of course, the executive has an obligation to enforce the law. And I think what you're seeing under the Trump administration is that enforcement. And bad dudes are not only bad as to this president, but they were bad as to the last president. And so to Errol's point, it is a continuation of existing policy to some extent. But hold on. The fact is that you had Mr. Kelly, in testifying before Congress, indicate that morale was down amongst ICE agents because, quote unquote, their hands were tied. And he also said that it would otherwise skyrocket, I'm paraphrasing, but certainly morale would be a lot better because what you're going to see is that lifted under Trump. And so I think it's clear that there's nothing wrong. In fact, it's favorable to this country with regard to border security, with regard to national security, with regard to protecting the public interest to get rid of the bad dudes, the felons. I think what you're seeing here, though, is raids that are over-inclusive. I think what you're seeing is people who are being caught up in these issues, unlike before, where it was the administration's policies to protect border security and national interest. You're seeing people who have minor offenses or no offenses at all who are being brought up in these sweeps. And so to that extent, the raids, of course, are a continuation. But the scope, the nature, and the aggressiveness is far different under this administration, to be clear.
So let me add these numbers. These are the numbers we've received preliminarily from the Los Angeles ICE office. 160 total arrests thus far. 150 of them had criminal histories. 5 had deportation orders already, and then another 5 on top of that. Tom, let me come to you because I wonder, from your perspective, if this puts the administration in a difficult position. How can the president both claim that he is keeping his campaign promise, if that is indeed the claim, that he's going to ramp up on undocumented immigrants in the country, but also say this is nothing to see here, keep walking, this is exactly what the previous administration did?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting what Earl was saying earlier, and this kind of goes into the politics and the perception of this, and the perception, of course, is reality in politics, at least. When you look at this, look at the protests that are going on, and then look at that Alec Baldwin sketch that we saw just a little bit earlier, about 15 minutes or so ago, where he starts singing, "Bad boys, right? Put that all together, and you understand the protest. So, it might not even matter that this is consistent with what Obama was already doing, because you have Trump's own words out there, you have these massive protests out there, you have everything's kind of whipped into a frenzy, and that's kind of the the veneer of what's happening right now. It's funny, is I was sitting at the train station up in Philadelphia back during the Republican retreat, and they had a couple hundred protesters out there, and I was talking with an old Republican source, and he mentioned his read on the whole thing was that to him, this was a lot like the 60s. This is like when you used to have spontaneous protests over almost anything that was going on, over LBJ and Nixon. So, this plays right into that.
And there have been protests every weekend now of the Trump administration. Quickly to you, Errol. The president has tweeted about Japan, has tweeted about the decision from the Ninth Circuit, has tweeted about many things over the last week or so, but not this necessarily. What do you glean from that absence there?
Well, my guess is that it didn't arrive on his desk. I mean, here again, this is policy for the United States and has been for a number of years. This is not something that necessarily comes out of the Oval Office. I mean, Joey is right in the sense that people who are sort of collaterally involved in these things are now getting caught up in a way that they weren't before. But, if you were a Salvadoran gang member with a deportation order, there's no way you were going to sort of just skate by. And it was always kind of a myth that these people were kind of just left to roam the streets of America. We've had a deportation force in effect for quite a while now. So I take this as the president not really sort of ramping this up, not really driving this necessarily, although I suspect we'll hear from him in the